If you have ever thought about starting your own podcast, you should check out Riverside. Riverside is an online recording studio that lets you record podcasts and video in studio quality from anywhere. And if you click on the affiliated link in the episode description and you buy a subscription, you will also be supporting the podcast. And if you're going to start your own podcast or you just want to continue to listen to great podcasts, you need headphones or speakers. If you click on the Amazon affiliated link, you can get great deals on headphones and speakers. And if you make a purchase, it will also help support the podcast. Both links will be in the episode description if you are interested. I just wanted to give a quick content warning. In this episode, I mentioned sexual assault, suicide, and violence. I will leave timestamps in the episode description in case you need to skip over those parts. But as always, if you need to skip this episode entirely, I completely understand. Alright, now let's get into the episode. I want you to think back to when you were a child. Did you ever tell a tall tale? Did that lie get so big that you couldn't control it anymore? Did anyone die because of this lie? Hi, my name is Courtney Jewell, and you are listening to the 11th episode of the second season of History Shelf, a podcast about history that proves that sometimes fact is even more interesting than fiction. For the second season of History Shelf, I have chosen to title this season, Something Wicked This Way Comes. You may know that comes from the William Shakespeare play Macbeth. I am going to be talking each week this season about someone from history that was accused of witchcraft. But as we go along, you will find that the wicked I am referring to were not the ones that were accused, but rather the accusers. You will find that those accused were not obviously actually witches, but victims of people that were out for revenge and personal gain, and those caught up in the hysteria of it all. And for this week, I am talking about Brita Zippel. Brita came from a wealthy family in Stockholm, Sweden. She was born around 1639. Brita's family was heavily involved in sports. Her father was of German descent. He was a master of ball sports and founded a building for sports for the upper class called Leila Ballhuset, which translates to the ball house. Her brothers were sports instructors for the men at court and for King Charles XI. Brita also had a sister named Anna. Brita was first accused of witchcraft in 1668. In 1668, Brita was accused of witchcraft by a master mariner named Cornelius. He accused her of cursing his ship and said that she had Satan throw him off his horse 3 times. Cornelius had no proof, so you mix his lack of evidence with Brita's good reputation, and what you get was Brita being acquitted. Cornelius was even fined for slander. In 1669, Brita married a successful brickmaster named Gallet. Together they had 2 children. One of their children was a daughter named Annika. Brita was unfriendly towards other people, except her own children. To them, she was a loving mother. But there was a chance that those children could have never been, because Gallet was advised by Brita's own sister Anna not to marry her. Anna called her sister, quote, a wicked woman. He was told that Brita put her pies under the pot when she cooked. That meant that she was a witch. But he did marry her. I mentioned earlier that Gallet was successful in his career, but that changed around 1673. He was confined to his bed due to syphilis. He was unable to work. In 1674, Brita was accused of witchcraft again. But this time, what was called the Great Noise had started. The Great Noise refers to a time when witch hysteria took hold of Sweden. This period lasted from 1668 to 1676. In 1670, churches started using prayer against witchcraft. Even though a girl had accused Brita of witchcraft after witch hysteria had started to spread in Sweden, Brita was found not guilty, and the girl was considered insane. By 1675, Brita's reputation had changed. Syphilis can make a person go insane, and that is what happened to Brita's husband. Brita was called noseless because her husband had lost his nose due to syphilis. Now, Brita mainly lived off financial support of her sister Anna. Her brothers didn't help her out any because they weren't talking to her or Anna because they had a feud over inheritance. Either Anna wouldn't or she couldn't give Brita enough money to get by because Brita's children also had to become beggars in the streets. Brita also often fought with her neighbors, so that made her even more of an outcast. So, when Brita was accused of witchcraft for a third time in 1675, things went different than they had the two previous times. By this time, witch hysteria was at a frenzy in Stockholm. Before this story goes any further, I have to introduce you to a boy named Johan Johansson, aka Yavel Boy. Johan was the son of Johan Davidsson and Karen Nilsdottir Gries. They lived in the city of Yavel in Gästrikland. Johan's father died in 1672, and 3 years later, when Johan was 12, his mother was executed. She was executed because Johan said that she abducted him and took him to Satan in Blackula, and she sexually molested him there. Blackula is a legendary island where the devil holds his earthly court during a witch's Sabbath. A witch's Sabbath is a gathering of those that practice witchcraft. Following his mother's execution, Johan went to live in Stockholm with relatives. There in Stockholm, Johan became a celebrity. Everyone wanted to hear all about his trips to Blackula. He would weave many fantastic tales, and people, even adults, would swarm to his side to hear what he had to say. The people of Stockholm saw this child as an expert on witches. Other children of Stockholm saw the attention that Johan was getting, and they started to make up stories that they had also been abducted and taken to Satan. The parents of the congregation of Katarina started to worry about their children. Parents started to keep their children in their homes so they could watch over them and make sure that a witch did not take their children to the devil. The priest of the congregation gave a petition that had been signed by the parents to the mayor after one night that they had thought that they had been attacked by witches. This petition urged authorities to investigate the witches. This brings the story back to Brita. Johan and other children said that they had been abducted by witches and taken to Satan and Blackula. They named the witches, and the names that came up the most was Brita's sister Anna, and Anna's friend Anna Man's daughter. The children said that they were attacked in the watch houses that were set up for the children's protection. Their parents used axes to chop away at the walls. They were searching for the witches that attacked their children. One parent even took hairs to court and claimed that those hairs were chopped from the head of Brita. Brita was understandably angry at the accusations that she was a witch that had been kidnapping children to take them to the devil. She was so angry that she slapped the children in the streets while telling them to go to hell. Of course, her doing that sure did not help convince people that she was innocent. Brita's sister Anna's children were questioned in front of their mothers. They all said that their mother and aunt took them to the devil. After this, Brita was blamed for just about everything bad or wrong that happened. When a ship burned in the harbor, Brita was the one to blame for the lives lost. People said that she would go to the gallows at night and steal clothes of the people that had been hanged. I actually think that could have been true because she was poor, so maybe she needed those clothes for herself and her children. Some children said that they saw her playing dice with her sister in Blockula. They were playing dice to see who got to burn down the royal palace. Brita was the winner. The children also said that when Brita stayed home from questioning, it was because she was tired from the devil whipping her. A mark was found on her back when authorities examined her, but when a doctor took a look at her, he couldn't find any mark on her back, or anywhere else for that matter. But he did find that she was running a fever. So she was probably sick, and that's why she didn't go to her questioning. But it didn't matter what the doctor found. Those persecuting Brita wholeheartedly believed that the devil had whipped her. Brita maintained her innocence. She said that she was not a witch, but she had sinned against the commandments by working on holidays. But she only did that because she was poor. Brita, her sister Anna, and Anna Mansdolter were found guilty of sorcery. They were sentenced to death on April 24th, 1676. Brita was decapitated and her body was burned at the stake on April 29th, 1676, in the square of Hertergård in Stockholm. Anna Mansdolter committed suicide, but her body was still decapitated and burned. Anna Zippel was passive, but Brita did not go quietly into the night. At her execution, she shook her shackles and mocked everyone. She cursed the royals, judges, guards, and even the audience. She told them that she was not afraid because she had made a deal with the devil. She would not feel any pain no matter what they did to her. She said that she was going to return after her death as a ghost devil of Satan, and that she would have her vengeance. She said that the first person that she was going to come after was the priest that tried and failed to get Brita to repent. It was an old custom to let a person about to be executed to have a drink. When she took her drink, the bottle had to be forced out of her hands because she almost drank the whole bottle. When she was taken to the platform to be executed, she did not make it easy. She kicked, screamed, and cursed her way there. It took a total of 4 men to get her onto the platform. 3 men sat on Brita to keep her down, while a 4th pulled her hair back to expose her neck, and a 5th man had to keep her head down. With a clean strike, Brita was beheaded. Her sister and the body of Anna Mansdolter followed, without the struggles of Brita's execution. Their heads and bodies were put on a stake and burned. Annika tried to save her mother. On the day of Brita's execution, Annika went to the priest and told him that she lied about her mother being a witch and that her mother should not be executed. The priest just told Annika to keep quiet. Shortly after Brita's execution, the way authorities handled witchcraft accusations changed. When the witch frenzy started in Stockholm and children started to say that they were being abducted by witches, the children's testimony was written down and they were asked to confirm their stories in court. After the execution of Malin Mansdolter, I will get more into her story on next week's episode. After her execution, they made the children repeat their stories in court. They were horrified when the stories changed. Even Johan's stories changed. This was the boy that they regarded as an expert on witches. Things really started to unravel when a teenage girl named Lisbeth Colesdaughter started to accuse members of the court of sorcery. It was believed that it was impossible for members of the upper class to be witches. She was also heard by many witnesses saying, quote, "If it were up to me, there would soon be only 3 women left in this city." End quote. She also said during a trial, even the courts know who Elizabeth Cole's daughter is. Who the hell are you? End quote. Authorities decided they needed to investigate and find out if these children were telling the truth or not. Witnesses said they had been told what to say by the children. This ended all the witch trials throughout Sweden. In 1677, the government ordered the priests in Sweden to stop all witchcraft accusations. It was declared that Sweden had been forever purged of witches. All the accused witches in Stockholm that had not been executed were set free. Annika and the other child witnesses were whipped for giving false testimony. Annika died on December 25, 1676, possibly as a result of her whipping. Elizabeth Cole's daughter and two other girls known as the Maids of Mira, Annika and Agnes, were hanged on December 20th, 1676. Johann, who seemed to be happy just to receive attention even when it was negative, was sentenced to be executed by hanging in November of 1676. He was 13 years old. And that was the life of Brita Zippel. Thank you so much for listening to the 11th episode of the second season of History Shelf. There are 15 episodes planned for this season. Next week's episode is going to be about Malin Met's daughter. I hope you come back for that. A few things before we go. If you want to follow this podcast on social media, the Twitter is at HistoryShelfPod. The Instagram is at History_Shelf_pod. The Facebook page is History Shelf Podcast. And the TikTok is History Shelf. If you want to help out this podcast financially, there are a few ways you can do that. One is you can buy merch from the History Shelf merch store. I will leave a link to the History Shelf merch store in the episode description for this episode. You can also become a Patreon. This podcast is always going to be free, but there are some perks that come along with becoming a Patreon. The first tier is called History Student, and that is $1 a month. And with that, I will send out a thank you on social media to you. The second tier is called History Fan, and that is $3 a month. And with that, you get the first tier, plus you get to vote in a poll that helps me choose the theme for the next season of this podcast. The third tier is called History Buff, and that is $20 a month. And with that, you get the first 2 tiers, plus you will get a handwritten note of thanks mailed to you from me. And the last tier is called History Lover, and that is $40 a month. And with that, you get the first 3 tiers, plus you get to choose 1 item from the History Shelf merch store. I will leave a link to the Patreon in the episode description in case you are interested. Also, if you click on one of the affiliated links, either Riverside or Amazon, and you buy something from one of those links, that will also help support the podcast. Also, if you have something that you would like to advertise on this podcast, so if you have your own podcast, or you have a book, or a YouTube channel, or some kind of product, or anything that you want to advertise on this podcast, I have a gig on Fiverr. And if you head over there, you can buy an ad space on this podcast. I will leave a link to the Fiverr gig in the episode description as well. But if you don't want any of the merch or any perks, or you don't want to buy anything, but you still want to help support this podcast financially, I have turned on listener support on Spotify for podcasters. But as always, the best way that you can support this podcast is to continue to listen to it. And there are a few other ways that you can help out this podcast for free. One is if you are listening on a platform that lets you rate this podcast 5 stars and or leave a positive review. If you do that, that would be very helpful. Also, sharing this podcast on social media and telling your friends and family that you found a podcast that you enjoy and you think that they would also enjoy would also be very helpful. Alright, well, until next time, keep learning, keep loving history, and come back for next week's episode. Bye.